And so today we are wrapping up not just a new series. For some of you, I know this is exciting. We've kind of come to the end of this book, so today is going to be, as I said last week, the exciting conclusion to Ecclesiastes. Not only because it's the end of the book, but because I think the conclusion of the whole book is actually very exciting. And then not only that, but we are wrapping up kind of a season of the year too, right? We're moving out of kind of that spring into the summer, into all kinds of things happening, and there's things in the life of our church going on as we kind of move into the summer season. There's people graduating, there's cottages being opened up, there's campers being cleaned out, there is all of the stuff going on. And so June is a very, very busy month. But today we want to take some pause and just kind of sit in this text to give us a little bit of perspective in terms of life, happiness, not only our quest for meaning, purpose, and significance, but we find that under this one man, this teacher's quest for meaning, purpose, and significance in life, what he calls under the sun. And if you recall, all through the series, we said life under the sun is simply a life attached from asking the metaphysical questions of life, detached from kind of questions about God, divinity, how does all of that work? It's just kind of that search horizontally. Like when I look around and I kind of take a look at life and everything that's to be experienced and understood and had and participated in, like what meaning, purpose, and significance is there to be found? And we're going to find at the end, spoiler alert, that there has to be some connection to the divine in order to truly discover meaning, purpose, and significance. Because all the rest is just simply vanity. It's hevel. It's here and it's gone. It's a mist, vapor, fog. And that's the conclusion that we're going to jump into. And so today is kind of like that final thoughts, the conclusion of the whole matter. We're going to take a look back and a reminder of a couple things, and then we're just going to kind of tie this hopefully pretty bow on the end of it all. And then as we kind of slide into summer, we'll go off in a bunch of different directions as we go. So why don't we just pick right up to where we left off last week in chapter 11. We'll start with verse 8 and just kind of a few kind of closing thoughts before we roll right into the passage that Mark read for us this morning. And so this first thing that we're going to share, I think is going to be super helpful for us, no matter where we're at in life, whether we're kind of feeling like we're kind of toward the closer to the end of the spectrum or we're nearer to the beginning. This is going to be helpful for all of us. And so here's what the teacher says. He says in verse 8 of chapter 11, so if a person lives many years, now how many of us want to live many years? Probably most of us, right? Like we'd love to have long life, right? If a person lives many years, let him do what? Say it with me. Rejoice in them. Okay, now let's just remind. Rejoice in them all. And in the Hebrew, the all here means all. Okay? So if you get to live a long life, which most of us want to do. Now look, granted, some of us don't get to. Sometimes life gets cut short. Accidents happen. People get sick. Things go wrong. So we recognize that. But if a person does live many years, let him rejoice in them all. That is every moment along the way, every stage of life, no matter what stage you find yourself in. No matter whether you're 20 or 13 or 88 or 64 or like whatever your age, right? Rejoice in them all. Now here's the thing that I think happens for some of us. And I'm sure your experience is probably similar to mine. When you were younger, didn't you always wish that you were just a little bit older? Anybody? Anybody with me on that, right? Like if I could just do what the big kids were doing, right? Because they can stay up later. They can go places I'm not allowed to go because my parents are fuddy-duddies. I don't know. Is that even a thing? I don't know where that came from, okay? So I haven't had coffee this morning. They already told you that. So my parents, they make all these rules for me, and they don't trust me, and I'm not allowed, and I have to be older before I can, and I can't watch this movie until I'm this old, and I can't go to this place until I'm this old, and I can't do. There's just so much you can't do when you're young. Isn't that true? right? And you just wish you're just a little bit older because, man, if I could be like the grade, whatever is at the top of elementary school these days. For me, it was like grade 5 growing up in New Brunswick at the kind of the mid 80s, right? If I could be in grade 5, like when we played King of the Hill outside on the snowbanks, it was always the grade 5s that were at the top of the snowbank pushing all the other kids down. You're probably not allowed to play that game anymore now, but that's what was happening. It's like if I could be in grade 5, I mean, like I'm there, like I'm the dude, and this is going to be it. And then you get into grade 6 because our school was grade 6 to 12, and you're like, can I go back to grade 5? Like I don't know. Right? But this is the thing. We just always want to be like that little bit older because we feel like there's and we just can't wait till the next stage and the next thing and just that little bit beyond where we're at now. And it's easy to become discontented from where we're at. But then when we get older, for all of us who are feeling older now, what do we say? I wish I was 20 again, right? I wish I was younger. Could I just go back to kind of like, right? And we get to this stage or we get to this moment of realization or, whatever it is, because you threw your back out or you're just not as fast as whoever or whatever happens. If I could just be younger again, that would be so much better. And here, the teacher is saying, don't wish your whole life away. Don't do it. Because it will be waste. Because here's the reality. You never get to do now again. Now, that's worth the price of admission, wasn't it? Like you never get to do now again. You don't get to do your 20s again. You don't get to do your teens again. You don't get to do your 40s again. You don't get to do any of that. You don't get to do again. And so at every stage along the way, he's saying, if you get to live many years, rejoice in them all. Find the good in every moment. Enjoy every stage. And don't keep wishing that you were into the next one. I mean, listen, as parents, we got this, right? If you ever had kids, it's like, if we can just get through the diaper stage, it'll be so much better. Right? If we can get through the tantrum stage, whichever one that becomes, right? Like it would just be so much better. If we could just get to the place where they can drive on their own and I am not running them everywhere, every day, every night to the and then 2 years after that, you're just like, if we could just go back and have some of that again, like what happened to the cuddles, right? What happened to the, those moments of, that we just kind of had ice cream together and they smeared it all over their coat. And man, if I could do that again, I would not get upset, right? We just kind of laugh about it and think that was funny. And man, there's no mess we can't clean up. Like we come through stages of life and sometimes we just wish these moments away in hopes that something would be better. Because if we could just get to the next thing, then we feel like it would be better. And the teachers are saying, look, if you live a long life, enjoy every moment. Enjoy all of them. All of those stages along the way. Let him rejoice in them all. But he says, but let him remember. Okay, so let's not sugarcoat this. Let's not just think that every stage is always just exciting and joyous and great exuberance and there's no pain or trial or difficulty. He says, but let them remember that the days of darkness will be many and all that comes is vanity. Now, the days of darkness he's referring to here could be a couple different things. It could be old age, perhaps, which kind of we get that sense that it might be based on where he's going next. But it's probably even, if not just that, maybe coupled with the reality of death, which has been a theme through this whole book. Now, I told you last week, when we kind of get to this conclusion, it's going to be helpful and encouraging for us, but it's going to take a really dark turn before we get there, okay? So just buckle up because we're headed into that dark turn soon. He says, before the days of darkness come, because the reality is that all of us will eventually die. Now, that's not meant to be a downer. It's not meant to be a wet blanket. It's to give us perspective on life, to help us to be able to appreciate life in all of its glory and goodness, okay? So it's meant to bring this appreciation that comes, and what he says is, like, in the midst of all of those stages and remembering, rejoicing in them all, remember that there are days of darkness as well, and those will be many, and that death will eventually come. And he says, and all that comes is vanity. Again, just this reminder that it's short-lived, because life is not as long as you think that it is. And yes, there are times when it can be difficult, painful, hard. And so after a lifetime of searching, the teacher offers this summary. He says in verse 9, this is kind of his own summary. He says, "Rejoice, O young man, in your youth, and let your heart cheer you in all the days of your youth." And so listen, if you're young, rejoice in your youth. Like, be glad that you get to be a youth. Like, enjoy that experience. Be glad that you are young. Now, can we just time out for a second? Just to kind of affirm, anybody 40 and over, would you agree? Would you want to pass that on to the youth? Enjoy your youth? Right? All of us 40 is not an arbitrary number. You've heard me talk about this, okay? So, right, but for 40 and over. And you, like, if you could say to anybody who's young, enjoy your youth. Like, be young. Enjoy that time. Like, take hold of it. Like, do all the things. Be part of the things. And this is exactly what the teacher says. He says, walk in the ways of your heart and in the sight of your eyes. Whatever you become passionate about, the things that you desire, right? Like don't just shelve those things. Go after them. Like enjoy the stuff. Pursue your desires, passions, and opportunities. Take the hold of the experience. Experience it. Right? Travel to the places that you want to and are able to go. Build the things you want to build. Be a part of the stuff you want to be a part of. Have fun. Serve others. Take risks. Like, all of that. Like, do those things. But like your parents, the teacher says, but, and this is a big but know that for all of these things, so just keep in mind as you pursue the desires of your heart, as you chase after the dreams that you want to chase after, as you enjoy your youth, just know that for all of those things that you pursue and are a part of and build, God will bring you into judgment. Now again, that's not meant to be a downer. Right? It's not meant to be kind of a wet blanket. It's just the reality that, listen, whatever we do, there are consequences for our actions. Right? And ultimately, we will be held accountable before God for the things that we pursue and do and are a part of. And so be wise in them. And so this is not kind of a carte blanche permission from Solomon, from the teacher, to just say, go do whatever you want with whoever you want, whatever you want, right? No rules engagement, just enjoy it all, experience everything, and you'll be all the wiser and richer for it. In fact, if we've paid attention through this book of Ecclesiastes, Solomon will say, I did it all and experienced it all. I did whatever I wanted with whoever I wanted, whenever I wanted, and it did not always turn out the way that I had hoped it would. In fact, it often, not always, came up short. There's things that I participated in and did that were damaging to my health, to my relationships, to all kinds of pieces of my life. In my search for meaning, purpose, and significance of trying to do it all and be a part of it all, and not using wisdom and discretion from time to time, here's what's happened. I can make a mess of things. And so this isn't just a statement like, whatever your heart desires, whatever your eyes see, like, go after it, do it all, experience it all. No, because here's the reality, that some experiences aren't worth experiencing. Some places aren't worth going. Some things aren't worth building. Some things may look like a lot of fun but end up with a lot of pain. Some things might seem like a good calculated risk but can end in disaster. Anybody over 40 agree with that? Yeah, okay. So heed the but in the middle of the sentence. Yeah. Enjoy your youth. Be young. Like don't miss that part of your life, but just remember in it. Act wisely. Seek to be as wise as you can in deciding to be a part of all of those things and participate in all those. Is this going to be helpful and beneficial? If God is going to hold me to account for the life that I live, then I best pay attention to his design for life. And what seems to be rules sometimes that seem to be prohibitive and restrictive are actually boundaries for my good, so I don't make a mess of a whole lot of things, right? So just know that God will bring that into judgment. And then he goes on to say this. He says, but put away vexation from your heart. Now, well, what is that? Like, who used the word vexation this last week? Anybody? the last year. Anybody, is that in your common vocabulary? Okay. So vexation is this sense of like discontentment or frustration. Just always being discontent with things. Always being frustrated about things. Just kind of this disposition of like, I want to enjoy life, but does that kind of explain it well enough? Okay. He says, get rid of it, because it's not going to do you any good. Like, learn to find contentment in the space that you're in, which kind of comes back to, if you get to live a long life, enjoy every part of it, all of it. Because, none of us want to do the diaper thing forever. Like, we want to move on from that, right? And there's a natural part of that of growing up. But like, listen, don't just find yourself just finding things to be frustrated with and discontented with in every stage either, because there's tons of things that you can preoccupy your whole life with, and you'll just come to the end being crusty and angry about everything, because I'm just so frustrated about them and that and the other thing and the fill in the blank. Right? He says, get rid of vexation from your life. Discover how to be content and put away pain from your body. Or it could be translated, put away evil from your body. Just again, know that there are consequences that have, that can be lasting from the decisions that you make. And so again, don't trade your future, your whole future, for a moment. Right? Again, anybody over 40 agree? Right? If you could go back, you think of all of your biggest regrets in life. The biggest regrets you had, would the things that you've given up for your future that you didn't even know you were giving up because of a decision in one moment, right? Like, don't trade your future for a moment. He says, but put away pain or evil from your body, for youth and the dawn of life are vanity. Again, this reminder that being young is like a mist and a vapor and a fog, because you're going to be young and you're only going to be young once, but you're not going to be young forever. Right? Remember that Pepsi commercial not long ago? It's like, is there anything else youthful you'd like to do? And the guy thinks back over some of the youthful things he did, and it kind of pans through these moments, and he's like, nah. Right? Some of those, no. Let's not do those. And he's saying, look, but the teacher's saying, look, life is short. Your youth is not permanent either. Like, when you're young, you don't kind of usually have this perspective, like, I'm not going to be here forever. Feels like I got my whole life ahead of me, right? But he's saying, in your youth, don't fall into that trap, because eventually you're going to have to start adulting at some point, right? And so then his encouragement becomes, which is going to lead into the next thing for the rest of us. He says in chapter 12, verse 1, he's on to say, also remember, so don't just remember that God will bring you or hold you to account for all of your decisions, right? The good and the evil, that there will be judgment for your life, but remember also your Creator in the days of your youth. Remember God, is what he's saying. The one who made you, the one who formed you. Seek him first, as Jesus would say, right? So remember your Creator. And this isn't just kind of like a shout out to God at the Grammys, right? This is like, be cognizant of the fact that God made you and formed you and has desires for you and has set out a course for your life and gifted you with things in order for you to be a part of what he's doing in this world. So remember the Creator, your Creator in the days of youth. Seek him first, and don't wait until you're older to do that. Why? Because it becomes a lot more difficult if you haven't learned it while you're young. It becomes harder to do. There's so much that you will miss out on of what God's purpose and plan and desire for you is when you're young, if you just kind of shelve that and set it aside and think, well, I'll pay attention to those things later on in life when it's easier, when I can get some of the things out of the way that I want to do, and then maybe we'll kind of fall in and around God's fence for me. No. Solomon's saying, look, the teacher's saying, remember your Creator in the days of your youth, because you don't want to miss out on what it is that the Lord has for you. But not only that, but remember your Creator in the days of youth before the evil days come and the years draw near of which you will say, I have no pleasure in them. Before you're older and you can't do what you always wanted to do anymore. Or you can't do what you always used to be able to do anymore. Again, any 40 and over agree? Can we get an amen to some of this wisdom? Right? Like, and I have no pleasure in these days. Now, this is where it takes a dark turn. Okay, so the teacher here moves from speaking clearly about life and wisdom and youthfulness and growing old and all the things that we should probably pay attention to in general terms. What does he do? He takes a dark turn from that, and he goes from speaking clearly into speaking in riddles and rhymes about life. Now, you may have found yourself, as Mark was reading this earlier, going, what is this about? Like this, what is this about? So let me just kind of go back over some of it for us and help us to understand. So if you're just tracking in your Bible, chapter 12, verse 2 says, "Now the days you say, I have no pleasure in them, before the sun and the light and the moon and the stars are darkened, and the clouds return after the rain. In the day when the keepers of the house tremble, and the strong men are bent, and the grinders cease because they are few, and those who look through windows are dimmed, and the doors of the streets are shut, when the sound of grinding is low, and one rises at the sound of a bird, and all the daughters of song are brought low, they are afraid also of what is high, and terrors are in the way. The almond tree blossoms, the grasshopper drags itself along, and desire fails because man is going to his eternal home, and mourners go about the streets before the silver cord is snapped and the golden bowl is broken, or the pitcher is shattered at the fountain, or the wheel is broken at the cistern, and the dust returns to the earth as it was, and the spirit returns to God who gave it." What is Solomon talking about? Death, right? And the years before it of falling apart. Okay, yeah, good. Like, this is old age, okay? Now, listen, this is not a shot at anybody who's experiencing these things, okay? And we could probably all stand up and say, yeah, agree, right? Yep, yeah, this is true. Again, so let's just hear the wisdom of this. Before, right, what does he say? The light and the moon and the stars are darkened. That's like losing your eyesight. It gets harder and harder to see. Whether it's because you need stronger glasses or cataracts removed, or your eyes are failing. They don't function like they used to anymore. He says before the darkness comes, before he says in the day when the keepers of the house tremble. That's not out of fear, right? It's before your hands have a shake to them. And you're always spilling your coffee, or you can't hold your keys, right? Like this is what this is the dark. Okay, get it? This is the dark turn. Okay, I'm not poking fun. I'm just saying this is what he's describing. Your muscles get weak. You're not bench pressing like you did at the gym. Okay, like these things happen before the strong men are hunched over. Okay, this is from the years of hard work, of hauling pots, right? Of construction, right? All the strength that was spent is now disappearing, and you got to go see Matt to straighten you back up. I got to do that now from time to time. Okay, so and not only that, but then the grinders. Right, this is a reference to a shrinking generation, because the grinders are low and are few. Can also be a reference actually to losing your teeth. Your grinders are disappearing. Right? There's this fact of before the doors are shut, this is a loss of your senses, particularly hearing loss, or maybe even just a loss of opportunities because maybe you're aging out. Whether that's appropriate or right or should be thought of that way or not, but like that's the idea that he's communicating. He talks about when those who in verse 4 he says, when the sound of grinding is low and one rises at the sound of a bird. What is that? You cannot sleep through the night. It just doesn't happen. You're up like way before the rest of the world because that woodpecker outside your house is pounding on the gutter, right? This happened to me one day, and I said, go over to Tanya's house back when she lived next door. And then, wouldn't you know, the woodpecker disappeared. And a few weeks later, Tanya's like, what? I'm talking to Tanya, she's like, there's this pounding on my gutter. And it's like, ha ha ha, right? It's like, oh, the woodpecker's at your place outside your window, right? But this is the thing. The birds start singing in the morning. We slept out in the camper about a week ago just because we set it out, had it all cleaned outside. You know the first thing we heard in the morning? The chickens. Like, now, of course, 20 feet away from us. Like, sometimes we sleep with the window open now. And so, like, again, first thing, it's like, can you just not sleep in for like just a little bit longer, right? Like the sound of the birds, and you just wake up and you're done for. There's no going back to sleep at that point, right? And so sleep gets, shortened is the idea. Not only that, but there's a terror or a fear of what is high, right? And terrors get in the way, which again has to do with a reference to being steady on your feet. You got to be careful where you go. You're afraid of missing your step. You may have to have some help with that. You don't want to trip over things because a fall could be disastrous. Like this is just what he's saying. He says, not only that, but the almond tree blossoms. Anybody know what color an almond blossom is? White, which I have a bunch of right here. Starting, right? Some of you know what that's like. Before the almond tree blossoms, and you're just like, okay, the white is blossoming. You can think of it that way if it's helpful. Like you're just like, oh, you got some gray hair. No, I'm just coming into full blossom. That's all. You just say that, and we're good to go. Okay, so like, forget the just for men, right? And not trying to take away business from Trudy, because Trudy can help you out with that if that's really an issue. But the almond tree blossoms, like things change color, right? The grasshopper drags itself along. Is that what a grasshopper is supposed to do? You're supposed to jump and leap and all the rest. And so before you got to start using a cane or a walker, or you're just slow to move and your feet shuffle and someone takes your license away. Before the desire fades, that your passion for things begins to fade. Maybe because of all these other things, or maybe because you're just getting older. Or maybe because you've seen so much, like for whatever the reason. And not only that, but then here becomes the even more sad, I think, the more sad thing is that the desire fails because man is going to his eternal home, which again is a reference to death. And the mourners go about the streets. Just waiting, because your day is coming. And they'll be mourning you. Right? Like, it's people know that you're not going to be around much longer. And they're already beginning to grieve your loss before you're even gone. Like some of those things, like some of us, we've experienced it. So what's Solomon doing? He goes from speaking clearly to using this kind of illustrative metaphor where he essentially paints this picture of a homestead that was once vibrant and brilliant. There's past memories. The house was strong, right? But now it's dilapidated. It's falling apart, right? It's just not the same. The place where there was like great meals and picnics in the backyard and birthday parties and family reunions and games were played and there was shelter from the storm, right? And the power went out and we all had to try to find candles or some kind of flashlight, right? The place where you learn to do certain things. And that old homestead now is about to be torn down because it sat empty for a while and is falling apart. And then, eventually, death. I mean, this is so encouraging, again, isn't it? I mean, I told you that it gets dark. He says, before the silver cord is cut, which is a reference to, again, whether literal or like, this is just kind of, again, this is a picture for us, that the cord that attaches the soul to the body, like whether there's a literal cord or not, that's not the point here. The point is, like, when the soul leaves the body, and the body fails, and the body's done, And death comes and the soul returns to God who made it, right? Like an umbilical cord that keeps you alive while you're attached, right? But you kind of grow to a point where when that cord is cut, now you're thriving on your own. Well, at the end of life, it's like when that cord gets cut, it's like, no, your life gets cut off. And there's this opposite picture. He says, before the golden bowl is shattered and the pitcher is broken and the wheel stops turning, like that is all a reference to the things that hold water, which is a picture of life when those things get broken and all the water runs out of it. It can't be used anymore. It no longer contains life. When we go to dust and the spirit returns to God who made it, when the body dies and is buried and the spirit returns to God, who is the righteous judge, who will bring all things into judgment, who will hold us all to account for all the good and all the evil. Like when this happens, that's what he's talking about. And just full disclosure, that's not how I want to go. None of this is how I want to go. Anybody with me on that? Like, I would much rather, like, none of these things happen. Just take me in my sleep, okay? Like, some kind of crazy accident that it's over. And you don't have to work through and deal with all the pain and the difficulty and everybody else trying to help you figure out what to do. Like, none of us really want to go through all that, generally speaking. I don't know too many people who do. And that's not to say that we just gonna want to give up on life. It's just like, wouldn't your preference be if you're gonna go to like, it'd be quick, right? Instead of having to spend years trying to sift through all of this. Man, and look, not that I really am probably gonna get any say over it either, but like that's, when you think of all of this, like it's hard, and it's like the house is falling apart. But then he says, vanity of vanities, says the preacher, all is vanity. And you just got this sense, it's this exasperated, like, ugh, like it's all mist, it's all vapor, it's all fog, it's all cotton ball clouds. It's just short-lived. And you know this in ways in your 40s that you don't know it in your 20s. And you probably know it in ways in your 60s that you don't know it in your 40s. And you probably know it in ways in your 80s that you don't know it when you're 60, right? And you probably know it when you cross that 100-year mark. If you live that long, you probably know that in ways more than all of us combined. But the reality is that he's just saying, like, life is short. And at every stage along the way, rejoice in it. Enjoy what you can. Now, the narrator who opened the book and introduced us to Solomon, or the commentator, whichever we want to call him, he then has taken all these collected sayings of the teacher and the preacher, and he's kind of wrapped them all up and tied them all together. And then he leaves us with a conclusion. He kind of ties a bow on it himself, and he provides some concluding thoughts. So what's said next isn't really Solomon's thoughts, it's a reflection on the teacher's thoughts. And he says, besides being wise, the preacher also taught the people knowledge, weighing and studying and arranging many proverbs with great care. And the preacher sought to find words of delight. And uprightly, he wrote words of truth. Now, what you might say, he tried to find words of delight. Well, this does not seem very delightful, okay? There's pieces of this book, they don't seem delightful. But there are places where he's written all kinds of words of delight. And he spoke the truth. And the words of the wise are like goads, and like nails firmly fixed are the collected sayings. You know what a goad is? It's like a pointy stick that you use to drive cattle, okay? Wise words are like a goad that stabs you, right? And it's like, ugh, I got to get going in a certain direction, right? And there might be a little bit of pain in the moment, but man, it's what's needed to kind of get us moving, right? And he says the wise words of the teacher are like goads that drive us forward. And if we will heed his wisdom, we will see the good that comes as a result. He says they're like nails firmly fixed are the collected sayings. They're given by one shepherd. My son, be aware of anything beyond these. Of making many books, there is no end, and much study wearies the flesh. We always used to post this up at school during exam week. This verse, we always, I think in the NIV, it's something like, of many books, there are no end, and much study wearies the body. And it was kind of like this reminder for us that, like, okay, you can study, but you can only cram so much, okay? And then you're just going to burn it out. And so you just got to hold those things in their proper balance, as it were, or their proper perspective. But he says you can apply yourself to learning it, to understanding. So you can do that, but you can also wear yourself out in doing that. And so what does he say? He says, the end of the matter is this. I mean, the preacher's covered pretty much everything under the sun at this point. So what can be learned from legacy and wisdom and pleasure and wealth and work and relationships and religion and all the stuff that we have talked about? Well, here's the end of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man, or of people. At the end of the day, when it's all said and done, fear God and keep his commandments. Fear God and keep his commandments. Fear God and keep his commandments. Now, why didn't we just say that in the beginning and save us 13 weeks of Ecclesiastes? Why not? Because here's why. Like, we like to argue about simple statements, don't we? Like, if we just started with, all right, the message, here's Sunday morning's message, fear God and keep his commandments. That's your duty. Have a great week, everybody. One, you might say, well, you got to put a little more time into that than that, Pastor. That might be the first thing. I know some weeks it's like you put a little too much time into this, okay, so we could just wrap it and go, okay, we got it. But here's the thing. When we hear like a simple one-liner statement, it's easy for us to kind of pick at and argue it and say, yeah, but then there's this, and then we got to think about it this way, and how does that apply to over here, or I just disagree completely, like, no, there's more to life than that. Like with one-line statements, that's what we tend to do. But when we are drugged through, to use that lightly, when we're drugged through the whole experience of something, when we hear the lengthier argument, when we hear the bigger story and the bigger picture of it, it becomes a lot more convincing. And we are less apt to argue with experiences than we are with statements. And so the teacher has given us his experience, and the commentator and the narrator is now saying, when all has been heard and said, here's a simple way to remember all the wisdom you've gleaned. Fear God and keep his commandments. This is what actually leads you to life, and it is the very thing that God requires. For God will bring every deed into judgment, whether every secret thing, whether good or evil. We will give an account to God for the life that he's given to us in every moment of every part along every way from our beginning to our end. And the good news is, in the midst of it, that our search for meaning, purpose, and significance does not have to be defined in the way that Solomon defined it at the beginning of this book. Right? Like it doesn't have to be defined by those boundaries of the beginning of life and our death. It's much bigger than that. And the good news is that we don't even really need to wonder or be confused about where we stand with God, whether we've done enough, whether we've been good enough, whether we've been wise enough, whether we messed it up so bad at one point that there's absolutely no way that maybe perhaps God would even care about me, let alone save me, redeem me, forgive me, all of the rest. Like, we don't have to wonder about that because his grace runs deep and it covers all kinds of sin and it can't be exhausted. And Jesus himself is enough. His grace is sufficient. Our faith in him, right? We become saved, forgiven, set free, brought into the freedom of God. What? Through not ourselves and our best wisdom and our best shot and where we didn't mess it up. Right? Like, that's not what earns the favor of God. We don't earn the favor of God. The favor of God is given. It is by grace through faith. So that we don't come to the end of life going, well, I was just so wise. I exceeded. I was so wise that I excelled everybody else and put everybody else to shame, and I'm the man. Or the woman. Or the whatever. Right? Like, we can't be king of the hill. Like, what happens is it is God's grace is sufficient. And so at the end of the day, well, the wisdom of Solomon in this book is helpful and it is good, right? At the end of the day, we to fear God and keep his commandments. Absolutely, we ought to fear God and keep his commandments. That's the conclusion of the matter. But the conclusion here is lacking one thing. It is lacking Jesus Christ who came to seek and to save what was lost. And salvation has always been by faith in God, by trust in his promise. Right? It's never been by our ability to accomplish or achieve or to build or to get it right all the time. It's never been it. Never, ever has it been it. But it is at the end of the day that we trust and follow Jesus, who's really the wisdom of God himself. Because the reality is, there's a lot of truth here. Life is short. Life is an enigma. Everybody dies. We will all be forgotten. That's not the most encouraging part, but it's not all bleak. It's not all without purpose. Why? Because life can be enjoyed. And one day, God will restore the broken cycle of life that gets described in this book. And he will clear the hevel. The fog will be burnt off. The mist will disappear. The vapor, right? Like all of that. It's like the hevel will disappear, and God will make all things new. And that short life, man, through faith and trust in Jesus, who can forgive our sins because of his cross and his resurrection, right? The grace he extends because of his good favor and kindness toward us who were undeserving. When we put our faith and our trust in Christ and we believe and follow him, we become a part of something more lasting that doesn't end with death. It does not even end in judgment or wrath or condemnation or hell. None of that. No, what does it end with? Life with God. Eternal life, actually, that is not hevel, that's not a mist, it's not a vapor, it's not a fog. It is everlasting. And God invites us into that through faith in his Son, Jesus. And if we want to find meaning, purpose, and significance, we look above the sun to the Son, who stepped out of heaven and came below the sun to walk this earth like we do, to not only teach us the ways of God, but to be the way to God, to offer us forgiveness and life eternal through faith in him, believing he died for our sins and was buried, that he rose again and was seen.